So we're continuing our discussion from last week. I have to say last week was very interesting. I want to make a disclaimer and almost an apology, not really though. If God forbid at any point what I said last week sounded presumptuous or egotistical, I did not intend to put myself on some pedestal over anyone else. Quite to the contrary. I meant to show that just like every other profession in the world, in the rabbinic world there are very many different paths and levels and hierarchies or whatever you like to call them. And we confuse lay people with the term rabbi because we've never really defined the word rabbi, something we're doing right now. And at the crux of the issue, can someone be a rabbi? Man, woman, whoever it is. The question is, what is a rabbi? What are we talking about? Let's define our terms. And we're in the middle of defining that. Anybody have that list here?
No, because it's Marlene's got it.
Okay, Marlene I think will be here soon. You didn't bring yours this week? Okay. Well, then I don't feel bad. If you forgot it, so I'm okay. I have it in my email.
We're on the third or the fourth one.
Yes, I have. I'll pull it up. 1 minute.
I know what the next one is.
I have your email, but what to add to it.
Do you think the role of rabbi changes when you live in a big city as opposed to like a more old-fashioned several hundred years ago small community where you walked around and you saw people in the street that you talked to and you knew?
Well, let's take the next one because Paul is bringing up a good question. Marlene will be here soon with a list. Does the title rabbi change? The obligations, does the job description change? In the example you're mentioning, between a big city and a small city. Go. What do you think?
I think it's it definitely, because it's korach hanesibot, what we say, which means like because you are in a small city, the people don't have other choices, so the rabbi have much more responsibilities. When it's in a big city, even if he wants, he can't do everything because the amount of people that are in the city.
That's a double-edged sword. I agree, but it's a double-edged sword. It's called in Hebrew acheret pipiot.
But there are many more rabbis in a big
If there's one rabbi in the city, this community has less of a say or a selection when it comes to who their spiritual leader is going to be. So they kind of have to do with what they have. That's what they have. In a larger city, perhaps rabbis work harder to not to impress, but to keep their integrity because people have choices. And when people are able to walk down the street somewhere else, they're not going to just stay there because they're a captive audience. And when you'll find this very often. Speakers who, they're very successful with their captive audience, but the moment you transfer them to a new location, nobody wants to listen to them. Because they don't have people in their own merit, but rather because the people are forced to accept this person as their leader. It's not just with rabbis, it's with teachers, it's with businesses. If you live in a town with only one grocery store, you're going to shop at that grocery store. What are your choices? The moment a second grocery store opens up, people get very upset. You're taking away my business. But at the end of the day, there is a certain growth that comes out of losing your monopoly on something. I might add that I have experienced similar things in my recent life. And, people, the Talmud says, people go wherever their feet want them to go. You can't force somebody. You can't, people are not, they're not playing cards. And people say, we lost this many members this year. Nobody took them away from you. Rather, it's a matter of working hard to maintain the people that are close to you. There's a certain relationship. I think that in a small town, on the plus side, like Dahlia mentions, you have more responsibility, which also means you have more connection to people. You can go to big cities, people don't even know the rabbis. You go to Israel, for example. Every neighborhood has a rabbi. I would like to know who knows the rabbi in that neighborhood. Probably, I don't know, those of you from Israel. Did you really know the rabbi in the neighborhood in which you come from?
Yes.
You did?
Yes, I did.
Where did you live?
Renana.
And you knew the rabbi who was there?
Well, of course, because he was the South African.
Oh, okay. Fine. That's fair.
From the South African people, so of course we knew the rabbi.
So people are I think they have allegiance to a certain character trait of a particular rabbi that feeds them.
That's for sure. The question is, now, does the role change? So I'm in a small town versus a big town. Could it be that people... I'll throw something out there. My aunt, when I moved to Israel, and I would come to her for Shabbatot, my aunt, Hashem should bless her, has many children and grandchildren. At her Shabbat table, every other Friday night, all of her children and grandchildren come to her home. That's the rule. 1 week by your in-laws, 1 week by your mother. 1 week by your in-laws, 1 week by your mother. When do you do Shabbat at home? When they die. Then you do Shabbat at home. Until then, you don't have the right to do your own Friday night dinner. Now, but you tell this to my wife, for example, she's suffocated by the thought of it. But the truth is, that's the way that many traditional, especially Sephardic families would operate. They're very close to home, and Shabbat is a time to be with your family. In that situation, I once asked my aunt, can I bring a guest over? And it was kind of surprising to her, why? Who invites guests to a Shabbat table?
Right.
And that goes on two assumptions. The assumption is every person must have a family they go to for Shabbat, right? That's what we have. We all have a family we go to. And two is, don't you have enough people in your own family you have to be inviting? Do you even have room for another person at the table?
Always.
I'm not talking about it in a generosity part. I'm talking about see, when some of us go to shul on Shabbat, we feel like it's part of our role to help other people come to a Shabbat table. There's somebody who's alone tonight, and why let them sit alone? I always have an extra chair at my Shabbat table. But if you're not operating under the assumption that it's your responsibility to make sure that somebody else is not alone, so your whole role changes. And when people tell me they went to New York and they said Shabbat Shalom to Jews on the street and they don't even answer them. It's so rude. I came all the way here to see Jews, and then I see a Jew and they don't even say Shabbat Shalom back. Do you ever wonder that where you are excited to see a Jew, do you know how many Jews that person sees every single day?
Exactly.
And they don't feel it. I'm not justifying their action. We feel like, you see somebody else is part of the tribe and you're out in San Diego, go say hello, ask them what they're doing for Hanukkah, ask them where they're going to be for Tu B'Shvat. If you would stop every Jew on the street in Brooklyn, you wouldn't ever be able to go anywhere.
It's the same thing in Israel. They don't acknowledge you either.
But I'm trying to say that perhaps I'm not trying to justify, nor am I saying that it's malicious. I'm trying to say your role changes depending on where you are. A rabbi of a community where everybody's taken care of for Shabbat, and everybody has extended family, and everybody has that one religious uncle who knows how to answer all their Jewish questions. So what really is the role of a rabbi? And there are 10 other rabbis on the same block. What is the role of that rabbi?
A teacher.
How's he going to... A teacher? Could be that's how he'll stick out. Maybe
you need dvarim b'halacha and stuff like that, and you don't know.
Okay,
today there is the internet, but still.
So difficult halachic questions. Somebody texted me a question the other day. If you could disconnect somebody from life support. I wrote back 2 things. I said, first thing is, I don't think this question is appropriate for a text message. This is a life and death matter. This is the kind of question that you can pick up the phone and call. The second was, this is above my jurisdiction, I'm not going to lie to you, that there's probably a different rabbi that should be answering these kind of questions. So it could be that this rabbi is going to stick out by... Marlene, we're putting a lot of hopes on you. Do you have the list of what rabbis are or not? The list of the 12 things we wrote down? Okay. We all forgot ours. And I can't seem to find the email. But it's okay, don't feel pressure. If you don't find it, we're doing okay. So they'll answer, like Dai said, difficult questions in Jewish law. That's what they're there for. But in between those times, their role is not the same as a different rabbi. What about a small-time rabbi? Small-town rabbi? I don't know if he's small-time, but he's small-town.
To do ashkavot, to do everything. He has to make sure that his community is solid and together, and that there's no problems in the community. And the community also has to know that they can always come to him with any question. If he can't answer it, he will get the answers and not tell them to go somewhere else.
I think more than anywhere else, he needs to educate the people in his congregation, because if you're in a little town, more likely they haven't had that much background in Judaism.
So we're saying two different things. I want to address both of them. The first is ever. What is it this? Is it? Is it?
Yeah.
No. Only when Emma's home. So, thank you. The first is taking care of the flock, tending to their needs. And we mentioned that it is on our list, like tending to not the social needs in the sense of, throwing parties for them and making sure the Jewish singles get to meet each other. Mommy? Masha?
11 o'clock.
Mommy, עוד רבע שעה, בבית, בעזרת השם. So,
Come to me.
thank you. So, taking care of people, the problems, the divisions inside of the community, two business partners are fighting, they're going to come to the rabbi. All kinds of things happen inside family struggles between a husband and a wife. And I think you're the one who added this to the list, to know how to deal with wisdom and compassion to people's personal issues. They might not be part of the rabbinate per se, but when you're that one man, kol boinik, you have to do everything together. So that becomes part of your job description. Could it then be that the training of a big town rabbi or a small town rabbi should be different? Could I argue that the small town rabbi maybe doesn't need to spend his whole life studying the intricacies of Jewish law, but should maybe take a few courses on how to help people? Maybe the big time rabbi never deals with that kind of stuff.
Well, don't you think that part of a rabbi's job is to learn psychology as well, so that he's able, because he really handles a lot of people who have a lot of different problems.
So let's ask you this question. Have you ever met a rabbi who was socially lacking? Don't tell me names, just tell me yes or no.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And actually, it comes in a big name.
Okay, so there is this is a problem. So now we've mentioned something that sometimes is lacking. So I'm going to challenge you. Is being the community unofficial social worker part of the rabbinic requirement? If you know rabbis who are lacking, so clearly not. Clearly they didn't need that in order to be a rabbi.
No, they didn't need it to be a rabbi.
So in which case, maybe we should redefine what you need in order to be a rabbi.
Are you talking about what you need to be ordained as a rabbi? It's like graduating college, now you can be a teacher. You know what I'm saying? You have your degree. Or are you talking about what do you need to be a successful rabbi?
So both. I think that we're talking about the requirements needed to practically be addressed as rabbi or fill a position of rabbi, and two, the expectations that people have from a rabbi. And this list covers both places. I'm just pointing out that whereas the expectation might be X, sometimes the truth is it's only Y. You brought up a good point too. Your point is education. I don't know that in the Borough Park, the rabbis spend their time teaching Judaism from the ground up. I don't know if they're busy telling people, what Tu B'Shvat is all about, or today's Rosh Chodesh.
Let's say that you go to a very little place.
So I'm talking about a very little place. That's what we're going to talk about. The rabbi in New York, that might not be his job. In Israel, you don't need to tell people what day you don't hand out Jewish calendars. Today's Yom Kippur. Everybody's off on Yom Kippur. That's not part of your job description. In Nevada, let's take this example. I don't know anybody. In Nevada, it could be that over there you have that responsibility. That the rabbi has to not just teach the intricacies of Jewish law, but even just very basic things about what it is to be Jewish.
Well, there are rabbis and there are rabbis. I mean, like in your situation right now, you've created your rabbiing. Okay? You're the creator of it. But in a lot of other congregations, before a rabbi is going to be the rabbi of that congregation, they meet with the board umpteen number of times.
Correct.
The board is explaining to them, this is what the community is like. This is what we need. This is what they do. This is what they don't do. And so the rabbi is now interviewing for a job. And may say, ugh, I don't want that. Or may say, this meets my particular skills. Now, if he's a rabbi that says, it's really important to me to be in a congregation where everybody walks to the synagogue, and that board of directors goes, wait a minute, who shows up in their Lexus, 20 minutes after the service is supposed to start, this rabbi might not want to pick that job. So, do you think there's one definition?
No, I don't, and I think it's important that we're clarifying this, because my point after all of this is the title rabbi doesn't mean anything anymore. or it means everything anymore. Perhaps the title rabbi can refer to a wide range of professions that used to be called different things and today are lumped into the same title, and it leads to confusion. And I'm trying to get there, but we're not there yet. Ariella, you wanted to say
I'd
something?
just like to add to what Paulette was saying and add into our list. I think a rabbi from the beginning needs to conform to the establishment, because if they don't conform to the establishment, they don't have the go-ahead to be with the community.
So I think you're picking up on a similar theme that you brought up last week, but you're saying it better this week.
What, politically?
Yes, it's close.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, actually I like...
Now there
I
are
think
two...
it's more the establishment because it's more detailed.
Okay, so there are two kinds of establishments that rabbis have to conform to. One is where they are from. Okay, so imagine that a rabbi that was ordained by a particular school in a particular denomination is going to have to somewhat stay within the confines of where they're allowed to go. You know, I've often sat with the rabbi and I'll say, hey, I would love to do this, but I'm a Chabad rabbi and I just can't. Or I'm a Chavetz Chaim rabbi and I can't. Or whatever it would be, because I belong to a certain place. Kind of like you'll put me up against the wall and I may tell you, hey, I would love to do that. I'm a Sephardic rabbi. I have my own limitations. On the other hand, sometimes the box gets even smaller when, in the situation you prescribed, the rabbi doesn't work for himself, or he doesn't work for God, but rather he works for the brotherhood or the sisterhood or the board of directors or the president or whoever it is that he works for. And then you've created an interesting situation. We talked about spiritual leader. Can someone truly be a spiritual leader if they're under someone else's jurisdiction?
No.
Do you all agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't see why you can't be your own person.
Because you are tied to
You could be
certain
tied to somebody, but you have your own-
guidelines.
you
Depends
have
how
your
you
own-
define spiritual.
Okay,
Okay,
let's go with this.
Beautiful.
Really not?
There's nothing right or wrong in these conversations, so let's
Right.
No,
do
we
this.
know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Paula.
You know, there are programs out there where lay people can learn to be what they call a Moreh Derek, spiritual teacher. And what are they learning in these programs? They're learning things that you think you would get from a rabbi. How to really listen to what someone is telling you. How to search in your own mind for where in the Bible or Torah or the Talmud, something you can say that would be the right thing for this person to lift them up just a little bit and point them in a direction, okay, that help move them off the dime of where they are. I see that as spiritual, okay? Now, some people may see spiritual as going to tell me which halachic law is important on Pesach. Yes, I can have the corn here, I can't have the corn there. So people define spiritual different. In my particular definition, it's how does my deepest place inside of me move off the stuck spot I'm in and shift to a higher spot.
So let's try this. It's a good point. Spiritual is very vague. And not just vague, it means different things to different people. So what if I rephrase the question? Can someone truly be a leader when they're under someone else's jurisdiction? Forget which
No, they can't
kind
be a
of
leader
leader.
because they've always got to be subservient to the person who's telling them what to do.
Paulette just listed a very common function of a rabbi, which is to help people lift their spirits, guide them in a new direction. Who's interfering in that private conversation you have with a member that just lost their spouse, or with somebody who lost their job, or with somebody who's struggling with raising their children, or somebody who's getting involved in that? Chances are that even if you work for an establishment, you work for the sisterhood, you work for whoever you work for, they're not going to interfere with your private counseling with other people.
That's true.
Right? That's true. So I believe that in that regard, people are correct. It's not a conflict of there's no real conflict here. So then there must be a different kind of leadership that could potentially conflict. Ariella, you're thinking of something specific, so say it.
No, well, the example that you just gave. If you are the leader, then you're ultimately the leader. Then the people know that you're the leader. But if the people know that you are some to the leader, then when you have a conflict that you're trying to assert and it just didn't work out, they know they can always go and to somebody above you. So it's undermining you. So I don't think you completely have the authority
To do what? To do what?
to make a judgment. To give your best, not someone else's best.
Judgment about what?
Whatever the problem or the
So let's
idea
push
is.
Ariela's envelope further. What could a rabbi particularly be a leader about that might clash with the people who are employing him?
Oh, how some rabbis do not want anybody to ride to shul.
Oh, so that's Paulette's example. Okay,
Yeah, exactly.
This is good. So push it.
And so what happens is they come and they become a rabbi of this congregation, and then they see that 90% of the congregation rides to shul.
So
Then
they're
the
met
rabbi-
now with a problem.
That's right. So there's already a conflict there between the rabbi and the board. There's already a conflict.
Why?
Because
Tell me what the conflict is. What does
the
he want to
conflict
do?
is he thought that he was coming to a synagogue where people were far more religious than what they were, and he wanted to be part of that more religious congregation, and he's found himself that he's not.
I want to argue with you because I want to make your question better. See, Paulette is right. Most communities like that, they have a search committee who's pretty much telling the rabbi, this is what you're getting yourself
That's
into.
exactly
And if
right.
they didn't do their job, and he didn't do his job investigating, I would say that this, yeah, but it's a mistake if it happens. Rather, I want to alter your question slightly. He came to the community knowing that 90% of the people are not walking to the synagogue on Shabbat, and his mission is to come and change everyone. Could this be more of a realistic situation?
Yes.
He views leadership as getting as many people onto his bandwagon as possible.
Correct.
Could this create a conflict with the community?
Yes, absolutely.
Tell me what it
Because
is.
the members are now going to complain, and members complain to the board, other board members. I've sat on a board of synagogues, I know that. They come directly to the board members, and they say, I don't want to say anything, but...
That's it.
And then the rabbi gets summoned. The rabbi gets summoned to someone's executive suite in downtown, who knows where, and then they have this meeting. I know how these things work. Talk to me
I
about it.
just wanted to make a point that as many congregants that are out there, and as many rabbis that are out there, there's somebody else who's contradicting whatever all those rabbis and congregants are saying against each other. So, say for instance, when I became religious, I had a rabbi that was my spiritual leader, and consistently he still is. But when I have a halachic question, or if I have a family issue that I wanted to have some chizuk on a personal note, I choose different people for my different needs that I have, and just the way everybody else should also find a different rabbi for a particular thing that they're good at, or they have a feel-good feeling of that particular rabbi to give them.
So you're lucky when you live in a place where there are 10 rabbis in the block. Right. But what if you live in Nevada?
One rabbi in your community.
Well, it depends where it is.
Well, can I take your step further? Because you're bringing up a good point.
Yeah, but
in every place where you are, you're going to find people who are, they like or they don't like, or they agree or they don't agree. That's normal in any community. Like in a workplace, you have such a situation. Some people like the manager, some people don't. Some people like the style, some people don't. Everywhere you go, not just in a Jewish or religious organization, you're going to find this. But you're now picking up on a different description of a rabbi. And that is perhaps guiding people on a religious path. And here are two different job descriptions in the world of rabbi. There's the rabbi Rosh Yeshiva, and there's the rabbi of a community. Rabbi Rosh Yeshiva, he is the head of an institution. He's the head of a place where people come to study specifically religion. It's up to them if they want to come to this specific institution. Right. And so he has, who carries more weight between these two rabbis? Who has the strongest support from his followers?
Oh, the Rosh Yeshiva.
The Rosh Yeshiva. The Rosh Yeshiva. I once had a discussion with somebody. You want all the yeshiva boys in Israel to enlist in the IDF. On an idealistic level, I understand where you're coming from. Everybody should be part of the burden of protecting Israel. I said, but you're coming from a place where you don't truly understand the power of the Rosh Yeshiva. Imagine if the entire yeshiva so-and-so, let's make up a name, yeshiva, give me a name.
Mordechai.
Yeshiva Mordechai. They open up their own, they all enlist on the IDF. And the chief of staff puts out an order. We're going tomorrow, we're taking Jews out of who knows where in Samaria. And the Rosh Yeshiva says, hey, all my students, sorry, this is the kind of order you're going to have to refuse. I'm not speaking out of lack of experience. This has happened before in our history.
Yes.
And now you have a student who's a soldier, also a student of a Rosh Yeshiva, has this identity crisis. Who do I follow? My spiritual leader or my commander? And then you'll come to a very interesting situation where you might find that people are more loyal to their Rosh Yeshiva, or if it was a Hasidic person, to their Rebbe, then they would be loyal to any other person. And now you've created this situation where people have dual loyalties. It's kind of like giving a person dual citizenship, but in a matter where there's a conflict. And you can lead yourself to very big problems. And the reason why a person, I saw this in the disengagement from Gush Katif, people are willing to go to prison because their rabbi told them this is what they're going to do. It makes you wonder, a normal person doesn't want to go to prison. But this is not a normal situation. The Rosh Yeshiva holds a lot of power over people. The reason is, people came to him because that's where they wanted to be. The rabbi of a community doesn't have that luxury, and it's not always a luxury. You should know sometimes it's a very big liability. But because the people in the community, either in one case they chose him, and it wasn't, they chose him because he needed a job, so he's a certain leverage they have on him, or two, this is a kind of, your person says, I come to the community because it was closest to my house. This is where I live. I live in Nevada. I don't have a choice. You can't be so polarizing in this community or else you're going to exclude me. And then where am I going to go? And then you'll find a politically correct rabbi. There's a rabbi today who runs around, all the politically correct rabbis are terrible. They're liars. They're cheats. Sometimes a rabbi not just doesn't have the ability to speak his mind, he shouldn't always. Because not everything he thinks is suitable for everyone in his flock. And sometimes the rabbi has to have what we call tact. He has to know when to say what things to who, to the right person. And so a community rabbi has a very different relationship with his following. So in your situation about the people walking to shul, what is the role of rabbi when it comes to changing people? I want to have this discussion. Are people supposed to change other people?
No. You can inspire them to want to explore on their own, but you can't change them.
One of the most things they say when you get married, don't change your husband or your wife.
Are you listening?
Don't even try. No, באמת. try and accept and live with everything. אבל לא, and the same with people. You can change them by דוגמה, by example, but don't do it yourself. They will change if they want, according to what they see.
Well, change how? I mean,
by
it's
walking
the
to shul
rabbi.
instead
Change
of
how?
no, by walking to shul instead of coming by car.
Well, the point is, can you walk to shul? I
Well, it
mean, this
depends
is
how
my
far you
only-
live from the shul. I mean,
It's
if you live.
not this kind of change I'm talking. I'm talking major change
Like
in
what?
behavior, in treating other things. From learning you changing, but not from somebody force you to change.
You can't.
By example of what others doing, and by example of what you see and you're exposed to, please God, only good stuff, we're changing.
So now we're back to the role of teacher.
I agree.
People are coming to learn from you. How do you teach? Someone sent me a picture once of a teacher sitting at his desk, and there was an elephant, a monkey, a fish in a fishbowl, and a turtle. And it said, okay, we're having a standardized test. Who can climb the tree fastest? An elephant, a monkey, a fish, and a turtle. Who's going to climb the tree?
The fish.
When you teach, when you teach, sometimes what you're doing is there are teachers who their whole method is, I have an agenda. And the agenda is to get everyone to do the same thing. And this teacher, that might be, by the way, you'll find many such teachers, and then therefore many such rabbis, and many such priests, and many such imams, and many such principals of schools, and it's a widespread epidemic.
Everywhere.
Their understanding, or lack thereof, is that one size fits all. I can standardize people and say the test, the ruler that we're going to test everyone by is how well can you climb a tree. Is the test of a rabbi, I'll argue this, is the test of a rabbi really to see, so who's going to stop driving on Shabbat?
No.
Is that his job?
No.
Some people might differ with you. Some people might say, yes, it is.
Yes.
That's like a policeman.
It's between you and
No,
Hashem.
he's not putting you in prison. He's not putting anybody in prison. But when he sits at this table, or he stands in front of his lectern or the pulpit in the synagogue, and he has to think about a message that I'm going to deliver to the community. Everyone in the world has an agenda. You had an agenda when you raise your kids. You have an agenda when you go to work. Everything in life has an agenda. The question is, what is your agenda? Some people are not so honest about their agendas. And then they get into these problems with their communities, which is, my agenda doesn't match their agenda. And then you find you're in two different places. Two very different places, going in two very different directions. I won't argue. There might be people in the world that want a rabbi who's going to stand at the pulpit and tell them, you have to do this and you need to do that. No, but there are such people. You could blame it on 101 things. Maybe they lack authority in their life. Maybe they always needed someone to help them make their own decisions. They're completely indecisive. I don't know what you could... But that's not what I would put down as the ideal candidate for a teacher, somebody who tells other people what to do.
Which is completely what we are not doing here. Right. You like the different minds that is pouring into... I
appreciate the diversity. Mm-hmm. You should know that there have been some people who come and try this class and then leave. And the reason is, they're not, it's not a flaw in them, but they don't appreciate...
The nice structure.
They don't appreciate the sophistication of many people who think differently. Yeah, many people are like that. You know, there are people of a certain financial class that only hang out with people in their financial class. They can't deal with somebody who's going to come to dinner with them and hope that they're going to pay. It's too much of a burden on their. There are such people in all different places in the world. People like to associate with people that are similar to them. It's a brave thing for other people to sit around the table. And if you could tell me, so what's the agenda? Someone asked you, so what's the point of this class? I don't actually know. I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't know what we do here. I don't know where we're going. But any class has something. I would say the point is to open up each other to different perspectives, to different worldviews, to different understandings. We're here to talk about Judaism for sure. No, I don't know. That's what we discuss.
And to make us move.
But to open our minds a little bit. And when you find that people give you the freedom to think,
you think.
So you think, and thinking might lead to change. Correct. It might. I'm sure all of us have changed in some things since we all met each other, myself included. But that wasn't the point. The point wasn't to change somebody. Somebody might say, hey, I like this Friday night thing. I once went to somebody's house. They hosted me for Friday night dinner. And they were in this awkward situation. They were hosting a rabbi, kept Shabbat. They didn't. It was an interesting situation. They had a bunch of kids. They said, okay, after the meal, we have 4 more hours till bedtime. What are we supposed to do now? I said, you have board games? So we played board games. The dad came over to me after I left for Shabbat. They said, I don't know about the whole Shabbat day thing. That's too long for me. But Friday night, I never played games with my kids. I would like to just do this. Let's do Friday night from dinner until we go to bed. Just hang out with each other. I don't know, read books, talk to each other, go for a walk in the neighborhood, do something that we don't have a chance to. Did I come there? They were just hosting me. That was my only point of being there. But I felt, hey, somebody experienced a little bit of what it's like for Shabbat for me. For me, is the one time that I get to just take a break and be with everybody that I love and just spend time with them. And if that's a value, so then, glad. If you could tell me that I changed somebody, good. But I don't think that's what I set out to do. So the job of a rabbi, as a teacher, you mentioned, as the pulpit, you mentioned about educating people. All of these are the job of a rabbi. But we had more things on the list. Not all rabbis have pulpits. Not all rabbis even teach. Do you know there are rabbis that never taught a class in their life?
Some just write books.
Some just write books. So can rabbis be authors?
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
What about rabbis that their whole job is... No. There are rabbis whose whole job is to slaughter chickens. Do you know that?
A shochet, yeah.
A shochet. He spends his whole life with chickens and cows.
That's correct.
So he knows how to kill people. That's his thing. I was once sitting with Rabbi Peretz. It was actually in this room, right here.
This one?
This rabbi, but in this Beit Midrash. We moved since then. That's my head right there, by the way. So we're all sitting in the class, and one of the guys was supposed to graduate. He finished 5 years of intensive study. And never really got the point that Rabbi Peretz didn't want him there. And came his time to graduate, and Rabbi Peretz gave him a certificate that was blank. I said, what's this? He said, I'm not going to ordain you as a rabbi. I said, what? He said, you're severely lacking in people skills. So you don't like people. He said, you're not kind to people. You're not compassionate to people. You like to make people feel stupid. He said, my suggestion, I'll give you a certificate to be a shochet. That way they can call you rabbi. You got the title that you want. But your job will be to kill chickens. You know what his response was?
No.
His response was very fair. I'm not licensed to kill chickens. I'll make them all treif. That was the word used. I'll make them all not kosher. And Rabbi Pellet said, I would rather you make chickens not kosher than make people not kosher. You can question whether it's nice to do such a thing. You can question whether it's misleading for someone to teach someone for 5 years and then tell them that. You can question all kinds of things about the story.
But I'm sure that Rabbi Peretz, during the 5 years, had spoken to this gentleman
numerous times
and explained to him that he wasn't what it makes to a rabbi. I'm sure he must have done that before.
So this brings up a good point. Why do people become rabbis? It's a better question than what is a rabbi. Why do people do it?
Why is there no, now that you brought up the fact that he didn't want to give it to him by the time he was supposed to get it 5 years later, why there's no prerequisites what expected from a rabbi and from somebody who knows how, if they're not qualified from the beginning, why must they go through it and be a rabbi?
So you tell me, why did this guy want to become a rabbi?
Because he thought it was an easy job.
Why is it an easy job?
He thought it was
They should have spoken to me first. I would fill them in.
No, but he obviously this kid.
Okay, so reason number one, it's an easy job. Can I explain to you? No, can I explain to you what she means? I'll explain to you what she means. Imagine a kid is raised in some ultra-religious home, and they never sent him to a school where he got a secular education. We spoke about that a few months ago, remember? And now he finds himself 18, 19, 20, maybe married, maybe getting married. Now he has to think of this question of how in the world am I going to make a living? What can I do? I don't know. I don't have any practical skills to go into the world. I can't add or subtract. I can't read English. All kinds of things the guy can do. The easiest track would be, in his mind, so I'll just graduate in advanced Jewish studies. And I'll teach, or I'll be a rabbi. How hard can it be? You'll be surprised at the amount of rabbis or rabbinic students, maybe they're not actually rabbis because no one hired them, that did so because they thought it was the most convenient path to go down based on their upbringing.
Yes, I agree with that.
But it's kind of interesting for women that grew up in America in the 50s, and we went off to college in the 60s. You had your choice. You can get to college, you can be a teacher, or you can be a nurse. It was only 10 years later that, lawyer and doctor was on the table, and
so there are communities today.
That's interesting that you say that, because in my husband's family, and I'm going back to his family, to his parents, they all went to university. His father not, but all the rest of them,
men or women,
both,
interesting,
became lawyers and doctors and things like that.
But it wasn't common. It wasn't common.
And for me, that's what I know.
So let's talk. Option number one, you become a rabbi. Perhaps you were raised in a world where your two options of what to do when you grow up is rabbi of a pulpit or rabbi in a school. Those are your two options. Take it or leave it. Option number two, why do people become rabbis? Option number two.
Respect.
What?
Respect.
Okay, there are people who do it for respect. You're right. They tell a joke about this in the Ashkenazi communities. They tell a joke about a guy, Moshe comes to look for his friend Yankele. He left him in Brooklyn. He hadn't seen him in years. And so he comes back from the West Coast to visit his friend Yankele. And he knocks on one of their old friends' house. He says, hey, do you know where Yankele is? He says, Yankele the thief? He says, Yankele the thief? He says, yeah, I don't want to talk to you. Slams the door in his face. And he knocks on the next friend's door. Yankele says, Yankele the mamzer, the translation not needed. He says, yeah, that one. He slams the door in his face. Every house he goes through the same kind of answer. Finally, he opens the door, and there is Yankele standing in front of him. He says, Yankele. He says, what do you do? What are you? Who are you? He says, I'm the rabbi of the synagogue. He said, why'd you become the rabbi of the synagogue? He said, I just wanted a little bit of respect. Unfortunately, sometimes this is the situation in which a person in the public realm finds themselves. They'll do it for... The Rambam mentions this. The Rambam mentions people who stay in rabbinic academies because they want that feeling of what it's like to walk into a room and everyone to stand up for them. This is not a new problem. This is an old problem. And what do you do with such a person? The Rambam speaks about children. Like at a certain age, you teach your kid to go to the bathroom, and you give like, hey, I'll give you a chocolate chip. If you go, I don't know what you would do to it. But if a person is 25, they're still asking their parents for chocolate chips to go sit in the bathroom, you know there's a problem, right? There's something so the Rambam mentions it could be that was the original intention of a person who wanted to study, and then after the years of study, the Torah took its toll, and if it's effect on a person, they realize it's not all about this. It could be. I don't know if the Rambam's idealistic world is in fact correct. There's a third reason. Give me a good reason why people want to be a rabbi.
Isn't it also to be in power? I mean, you are in control of the community.
That's another negative reason. So I would say that goes into respect. Yeah, it's a certain authority that you get. Sure.
Those kind of experiences.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yes.
I'm not blaming you. A certain authority. But give me a good reason.
A positive one to teach. Well, to teach.
Okay. They're passionate about teaching. They're passionate about teaching.
Teaching unite.
So, what are you going to add to this?
Well, Luzzatto, his book, Mishalat,
Yisharim.
right, is all about purity. And if someone really has a rabbi, a pure desire to help people, he should be something like the Peace Corps, someone who goes out and feels that he has a special calling to help people. And I think that is a quality that a rabbi should have. And I think there are many rabbis out there who don't have refined characters.
Okay, so then why do they go into the... You're supposed to give me a reason for why did the person enter the rabbinate?
Because they're misguided.
Okay, so that falls into our category. It's a misguided desire, but I want to take something positive out of it. Are there people that go to the Peace Corps because they really believe in it?
Yes.
Are there people that go into the rabbinate because they're very passionate about what the role of rabbi includes? Of course. So there's this aspect of it too. Let me ask you a question. When a person applies to university and they have requirements, prerequisites to get in, you have to have taken this class in high school, and AP, honors, I don't know, whatever the SAT scores, whatever it is that makes you get in. You have to be able to pay a tuition, whatever it would be that fits into this category. How do you judge a person's character? Like, how do you put imagine I was to open a new rabbinic school. How do I make sure the people that are coming to my school are the people that are fit to be rabbis?
You don't know that. You never know that.
Okay, so you interview them. So tell me what I would do. This is a good point. So you're saying I will never know that, even with an interview?
You do your best to interview.
Okay, so both of you tell me.
Never know about the
what do I ask in an interview? What do I do? What do I
No
look
matter
for?
what you ask, you might not ever get to ask.
So you're with Paulette, but tell me what
guideline that you will have to ask, like, did you finish 12 years stamp, 12 years of schooling? Then it's the next one. Did you never go to prison? Did you ever do drugs?
But I'm sorry to tell you, but these are good questions. I wish they would ask some people before they...
Why do you want to be a
But
rabbi?
there is a something.
Actually,
That's a good... Why do you want to do it? Figure out their intentions, their motives. Figure out their history. You know, do you have a
clean records from police. They do. Sometimes you didn't need to bring records.
Is it true what I've heard that a person wants to be a lawyer, they can't have had something on their record? Is that true?
Yes, that is correct.
So why couldn't it make sense? Why couldn't it be the same for a rabbi? I'm going to make an argument why it couldn't, but you tell me why it couldn't be the same.
Why shouldn't it?
I'm asking you the question.
I think that there's no one governing board to
Okay, that could be the answer. If I put a rule that says if you have any kind of record, you can never apply to rabbinical school. You know, Rav Shlomo Kabach has a famous story. I have to share it to you because anyone who wanted to say something, I'll tell you in a second. Rav Shlomo Kabach has a story about Moshe the Ganav. Moshe the Ganav in Jewish means Moshe HaGanav. Moshe the thief. Okay? Moshe the thief lived in the town of Mezbush where the Baal Shem Tov lived. But some Hasidim despise this story because how could you say such things about the Baal Shem Tov? If Rav Shlomo said it was true, I don't know that you can believe it's true, but you can believe that such a story could have happened with the Baal Shem Tov. That I absolutely believe. Moshe the Ganav, he was a thief, and whenever he would steal from somebody, and he needed to feed his family, what can he do? He would steal from someone, the cops would start looking for him, he would run to the Baal Shem Tov and say, Rabbi, pray, make a miracle, make them forget. The rabbi would pray for him, the police would forget that he stole something, and he kept getting off the hook. This happened many, many times. And every thief has his final exit. He's got his last thing he's going to steal is going to get him set for life. And Moshe the Ganav, he had there was a famous duke who was coming through town. He was sleeping over at a Jewish inn, and he was going to work it out. That he went to the innkeeper's house. He made a copy of the key inside of a wax. He was going to get into the room. He had a whole thing planned out. This was his final job. This is what he was doing. Now, who came to help Moshe? Moshe, you can't just do such a job on your own. So all the other thieves in Mezbush came to join him. It was like a whole convention of thieves. And they planned this very well, months in advance. Finally, the Duke comes. And the Duke fell asleep. They got him drunk. They had someone at the bar who was sponsoring all the drinks. Fell asleep in his bed. They break into his room. They take his treasure chest. They're coming down the ladder. And the cops are notified. They start to chase after Moshe. Moshe doesn't know what to do. He runs to the Beit Midrash of the Baal Shem Tov. Says, I need to speak to the Baal Shem Tov. I never do this. Well, you never heard? The Baal Shem Tov passed away 3 days ago. He said, of all the times for the Baal Shem Tov to pass away, now he passed away 3 days before my final job. He didn't know what to do. He was broken. He said, well, who took over for him? There's got to be another rabbi here. And at that point, there was a student of the Baal Shem Tov who took over for him. It wasn't the son, and then later replaced by the Maggid. There was another rabbi, I don't remember his name, and this Moshe the Ganav came to the rabbi and said, Rabbi, let me tell you what happens. Every time I steal, I come here, the Baal Shem Tov prays for me, and I get off the hook. Can you pray for me also? And the guy says, are you such a despicable human being? You steal and you come into a house of worship? You steal from another human being and you come here? Get out of here! We don't want people like you here. Throws him at the front door. He doesn't know what to do, so he runs to the cemetery and he looks for the freshest grave there. And he falls at the grave of the Baal Shem Tov. He starts to pray and crying and pray and crying. He falls asleep. Now, it's such a Hasidic story, by the way, the structure of the story. He falls asleep at the rabbi's grave, and then the Baal Shem Tov appears to him in a dream. And he says, Moshe, you stole. Promise me this is your last time. I promise, the last time, I'm not stealing. I promise your last time. I said, okay. I have another student that I left behind. And you're going to go to him and tell him the following sentence of Torah that I mentioned to you, and he's going to know that I sent you. Go to him, he'll pray for you, and it's all going to be over. So Moshe ran to this student, and he was afraid of rejection. Again, maybe he's going to throw him out. He says, the Baal Shem Tov came to me in the dream, and this is what he told me to tell you. He says, I prayed that they should forget about what you stole. And they forgot about what he stole. And then Moshe hit him like a train. He said, what are the other thieves going to do? Who are they going to go to when they steal? All these rabbis, they don't want to talk to thieves. They don't want to talk to criminals. Who are they going to go to? The Baal Shem Tov is dead. He said, I'm going to be the rabbi of the thieves. And Rav Shlomo Karbach said that in Hasidic legend, this rabbi ended up becoming a student of the students of the Baal Shem Tov. He ended up becoming a famous Hasidic rebbe, who obviously did tshuva since his time as a thief. And out of respect, so that they shouldn't embarrass him, they never ever told us which rebbe it was that was the rebbe of the thieves. But Shlomo Karbach's whole point of the story was, even the thieves need a rabbi. Even these lowlives that are criminals, they need a rabbi. And so perhaps if you close the door to people who have such an experience, if someone comes to me and says, Rabbi, I was convicted of murder. I'm going to run out the window to the porch, jump into the freeway, get a hitchhike with someone. But another person might say, I served time also. Let's talk about how you can grow from here. Now, I would question whether I would go pray in this rabbi sitting. I would question such a thing. But I would leave room to say that he's not a lawyer. He's not here to uphold the law. But perhaps of his job as a counselor of people, maybe sometimes experience is the best teacher you could have. And this is the role of the rabbi. I obviously wouldn't make it a requirement for rabbis to come to school, and they have to have a record in order to be a good spiritual leader. Now, they don't have to be a drug addict to help people who are drug addicts, but all kinds of things. But I do want to bring out this point, and that is that I don't know that there is a way. You can interview, and you can kick, and you can scream, and you can ask questions. I don't know that there is a way to truly vet a person's personality, to truly figure out who's good, who's not, who's great, who's not.
The other thing, I just want to jump in. Medical people practice medicine. Teachers, even though you've gone through teachers' college and whatnot, practice teaching. And rabbis practice rabbiing. You could be terrific and wonderful and brilliant, and you know what? Every single day it's a new situation. Everything shifts and changes. And so you're practicing as you go along. And hopefully further on, at some point down the road, enough people have heard you or listened to you or commented or whatnot that other people start saying things. Hopefully good.
Guinea pig on people along the way.
That's every
See, both of you are looking at the same thing in a totally different perspective.
Every field is like that.
Every field is the same thing with therapy.
That one.
Exactly. And there's no one governing body for rabbis. Someone goes to this school, this Rosh Yeshiva, and they have their rules and regulations for who they're willing to give smircha to, and another Rosh, school does it differently. There's not one governing body. You can't have uniformity.
You're right. And that is a good thing. I wouldn't argue that it's a bad thing. It's a good thing because it gives many different flavors and perspectives. It also means that you can't really set a standard anywhere, because if you're not going to make him a rabbi, someone else might.
There has to be certain core values that exist.
Are there?
That's our question.
That's the question.
That's our question.
Well, what did you want to ask her?
I'm saying, we're talking about rabbi, we're talking about going back to the source. It's Torah that we're learning. And if the Torah teaches us to be so you learn about all kinds of people, good, bad, and ugly. So as a rabbi now you know how you have to have those qualifications of knowing all people from the bottom of you into depths of the next person. So if that's a rabbi, then that's not a problem. But if it's somebody like, if we compare it to an occupation that should learn it, literally guinea pig on people until you become a good profession,
it doesn't mean we will become a good profession. Sometimes it doesn't.
That is true. But now we're comparing Torah to man-made. It's not the same.
But
You're
a
not
good rabbi
comparing
would
Torah.
know to
You're not
learn the
comparing
right thing
Torah.
from the Torah.
But that's what the rabbi is. He's teaching us Torah. He's not teaching us medicine.
But he's teaching more than
He's
Torah.
teaching your life.
He's teaching
your life.
Thank you.
And that's what Torah is. It's
But
life.
I think a rabbi has to know more than Torah. He has to
Torah is life.
He has to learn how to have an emotional connection with people.
Are you all arguing with each other? Because I'm hearing the same thing in different words.
Okay, well maybe I'm just trying to understand.
No, I'm saying that you're right. You're right, and you're right, and you're right. And look, I'm not being a politician. I'm telling you.
I have one last thing. When an authority is interviewing a rabbi to be a rabbi, he should ask, how much time do you take every day or in a week to improve your relationship with God?
Let me ask you a question. What if a person, they only need half an hour a week, another person needs 3 hours a day? Can you really set a standard?
No, you can't.
No, but I think people in the congregation can tell if you're genuine and you do have more of a deeper connection.
Okay, yeah, but
with
you're already
God.
talking about a person who's in the congregation. Here I'm talking about they're still getting ordained. This is like we're trying to preempt there was a famous poem that was written about that was called The Ambulance or the Fence. And there was a town on top of a cliff, and there's a town at the bottom of the cliff. And they had a big... People kept falling. They were taking pictures on the cliff, and they would fall over from the cliff onto the bottom, and they would die. And so the question was, the guys at the bottom said, hey, you should put up a fence over there. People are falling over. And said, no, we don't want to spend the money. You should bring an ambulance and keep it at the bottom of the cliff. And they got in this fence. We don't want to have an ambulance. You should put a fence. Back and forth. Which is better, a fence or an ambulance? And sometimes I feel that we operate in the ambulance department. Like, we'll put cliffs, we'll let people fall over, and if there's still something to scrape up off the ground, we'll be there to fix. If we're talking about a person who's at a pulpit actively already, I believe we're late. We're way late in the game as to where they are in their life or in their position. And you could argue that in such a place, maybe, what are you going to do to him now? You're going to take him away? You're going to ruin their life?
Well, they do. That's exactly what they do here. get rid of them.
That's terrible.
They
Okay.
do. They do that all the time.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, no,
But I want to bring us. I want to bring us back to the table because there's something important that's coming out of here. From all the things we've mentioned so far in our list of what you need in order to be a rabbi or a good rabbi, how many of them have to do with the gender of the rabbi?
Oh, that's right. That was
It really doesn't have to be the gender.
Don't be afraid. I'm not going to hold this answer against you.
I don't think it has to
I'll say according to the Torah.
What's the most important thing
Okay,
a rabbi has to have his heart?
Sure, you could say. Someone else might say, "I want a rabbi with brains. This one has too much heart."
No, but somebody who really feels.
Well, that's what we're coming out of this conversation.
Capable of empathy and compassion. But not a lot of people have that.
So we're coming to this discussion here.
We're knowing
So now you just mentioned, well, not a lot of people even have these credentials in the first place. And this takes me somewhere else. This takes me to an article that I sent Paulette over the weekend. We're asking questions about a system which it's like a monster that has been created and we don't know what to do with. And this goes partially into what Ariella mentioned about establishments. You ever look in the Mishnah, Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, and you wonder why he was called Hillel and not Rabbi Hillel? Like, how can we call Moshe? But if you call your rabbi by his first name, well, he'll never talk to you again.
Really? But you say rabbi first.
Well, if you don't say rabbi first.
It's supposedly this
Where did we get this title in the first place of rabbi? Do you know?
the establishment.
We started an establishment at some point in time. We always ordain people into the rabbinate. You find already as far back as Shem and Ever had a yeshiva. He had it in the times of the forefathers of yeshiva. What do they study? It's a different question. You then find Moshe Rabbeinu. Yitro Hezbollah comes to him and says, you can't be the only rabbi here. You have to let other people judge also. Other people help them out because you're being it's past your capacity. And so you find they bring in Yoshua as considered the spiritual leader of the Jewish people after him, and so on and so forth. But when did we start using this title rabbi?
Sanhedrin, maybe?
But even the Mordechai was on the Sanhedrin for the story of Purim. We don't call him Rabbi Mordechai.
Okay, there was, let me see. Oh, darn it. I'm losing train of thought. Rabbinical Council. And I think
that's what she mentions, right? But I just point out there's some people there.
How did they become the name rabbi?
Oh, not all of them had the title rabbi. Some did and some didn't.
Why did they call it the Rabbinical Council?
It was called the Men of the Great Assembly. It wasn't called the Rabbinical Council.
Right.
Anshe Knesset HaGdolah was called. The Knesset, the famous word Knesset comes from here. So I'll answer the question for you. When the Romans occupied the land of Israel, and the Romans came in with all kinds of philosophers and all kinds of leaders and champions, all kinds of people, figures with titles. The rabbis, the Jewish people, had to say, who are my leaders? So many titles began to develop. The Jews had a prince. The prince was always a rabbi, but we never called him by a title. All of a sudden, they became Rabban Gamliel. Rabban is a title of the rabbi, meaning the chief of the Jewish people. We added a title like Hanasi, the prince, in order so that the Romans should know, one is he's a rabbinic leader, and two is he's also our political leader. That's why we added the title. When the Jews further developed and we spread out to Babylon, we now had a question between the rabbis of Israel and the rabbis outside of Israel. Is there any difference between the two of them? And the rabbis of Babylon said the rabbis in Israel are more important and more authoritative than we are. And therefore the title Rabbi developed. Rabbi was given, or in Sephardic Hebrew, Ribi. Ribi was given to rabbis who lived in the land of Israel, whereas the title Rav were given to rabbis in Babylon, which is why if you look in the Talmud sometimes as Rabbi so-and-so or Rav so-and-so, it tells you where they're from, geographically. And then these titles became a fixture. Once we already gave people titles, because if he's called Father so-and-so, or he's called Pastor so-and-so, then what are you going to call the rabbi? Just by his first name? So we had to tell the world that this is Rabbi so-and-so. It wasn't so long ago in this country that rabbis used the title Reverend. You'll go to old synagogues and you'll find Reverend Israel so-and-so. What is it? Reverend? Reverend Goldberg. You ever look? What kind of Reverend Goldberg? Reverend was the title on the street of a man of religion, a man of the cloth, and so they chose the same title. In Sephardic communities, we used to call the rabbis Chachamim, Chacham so-and-so. Never called him Rav Ovadia Yosef, we always called him Chacham Ovadia Yosef. Chacham Ovadia, more by his first name. Chacham Mordechai Eliyahu. Chacham Ben Zion Abba Shaul. Chacham Ezra Atiyah. That's what we call the rabbis. So today, because the Ashkenazi establishment is what's dominating in Israel, we've opted out of the title Chacham and back to the title of Rabbi because that's what people know. That's if I would tell you Chacham so-and-so, you would wonder if he's even Jewish. And so essentially these titles are first and foremost irrelevant. They're not really Jewish titles. We use them to mean something, but they've changed over time. Just like we changed from Rabban to Rabbi to Rav to Chacham to Rabbi to a Rebbe. You ever ask what comes in a Rabbi and a Rebbe or a Rebbe? A Hasidic Rebbe. I can never be called a Rebbe. Unless it's in a Jewish bookstore, they say, "Hey, Rebbe," that means they're making fun of you, like a guy who thinks he's so important. Right? You have to be Hasidic to be called a Rebbe. There are certain such titles, but the titles are irrelevant. The job description. In the job description, how much of it is connected to being a man or a woman?
It isn't.
Not really.
No, it isn't.
Not really. See, if you were to tell me the main function of a rabbi is to read the Torah and to lead services and to be part of the minyan, and you would make the argument that a woman can't be counted as a minyan and doesn't read the Torah and doesn't lead services, you're in a really big bind because the job doesn't fit the person who needs to do it. If you're telling me that the greatest part of being a rabbi is their heart, is their compassion, is their counseling, is their understanding, is their leadership, is their teaching skills, Devora is just as qualified as a rabbi as I am. Is she not?
Yes,
Usually women better in compassion. Right.
Thank you. This begs an even bigger question. If a man wants to be a rabbi, he goes to rabbinic school, yeshiva, and studies a certain amount of material, gets ordination, becomes a rabbi. If a lady wants to be a Jewish spiritual leader in the Orthodox community, what does she have to do?
She can. Orthodox?
Is my wife a Jewish spiritual leader?
Yes.
Yes. Can I ask you a question?
She can't do
in her own right, or because I'm asking a painful question.
Her own right.
I'm glad you think so. But if my wife wasn't married to me, nobody would call her Rabbanit Devora.
Yeah, they would just call her a wise woman.
Only in the Orthodox
and she would tell you, make her sound old. Now I'm asking you this question: can a woman become a Rabbanit? Don't call her rabbi.
No.
Can she be a Rabbanit if she's not married to a rabbi?
In a reforms, yes.
Is that what you say?
No, I mean being whatever
Well, doesn't
this
rabbinit
is.
mean wife of a rabbi?
Of course she can.
It's what no, Rabbanit can mean also like a very important woman.
That's right.
But it's used to refer to the wife of a rabbi.
Yeah, right. So from the conversation that we spoken here, yes. From the acceptance of the community or the establishment will accept her, then it's no.
We're getting into
the community will accept, אבל הלכה כלי באורתודוקס אין chance.
So we're getting now towards interesting discussion. I might flip a coin on you soon. I might flip the tables on your head in a minute. But based on what you are feeling the job of a rabbi to be, so really what is the problem? Some of you are looking at me like, oh my gosh, see, he says crazy things. But this is like, right now you're pushing our limits to points. Some of you are looking at me like, are we going to be disappointed soon in this one? Some of you are like, oh man, are we going to hear the most exciting thing we ever heard in our life? I see two different facial expressions here. I want to leave you with a point, and this point is until next week. I told you about the deterioration of rabbinic schools and the creating of a monster that we don't know what to do with. It used to be, when Moshe Rabbeinu ordained Yehoshua as what we would today refer to a rabbi, the spiritual leader of the Jewish people, he made halachic decisions, he led the Jewish people as a community, he led them also politically, he led them when it came to their own personal problems. How did Yehoshua gain this title?
By Moshe and Hashem.
By Moshe, Hashem, he passed a certain power. But what were Yehoshua's credentials? How well did Moshe Rabbeinu know him?
From experience.
He worked with him all the time.
What is it? Does anyone know what the Torah says about him?
He was with him all the time.
What does the Torah say about him?
He shadowed him. He shadowed him.
V'anav lo yamush mitoch ha'ohel. This young man never left Moshe Rabbeinu's tent. Moshe Rabbeinu was so familiar with his style, with his personality, with his teaching, with his wisdom, that there was no other person that you could even imagine would be the next leader after him.
Well, why don't they ever say he was a natural leader? You know, there are some rabbinical, kids who want to decide to be rabbis. You know, shouldn't the authorities look into their background?
Well, you're bringing up a question that we already answered, and the question is, you can't really ask a person the right questions and get a good answer. Rather, Moshe Rabbeinu got his answer when he truly experienced years. Who is Moshe Rabbeinu? What is he? When they ask him a question, how does he respond? How does he act during war? What does he act during peace? How does he act with other people? When it comes to what?
We thought somebody walked into your house.
No, we have a guest in the back.
So we realized
Yeah. Thank you for checking. I'm glad you are bodyguards.
I was the follower.
Yeah. Now, this was true for many, 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 many generations. A rabbi had disciples that were close to him. And he said, you are going to be my student. I'm going to teach you what I know. You're going to carry on this torch forward. Nobody signed up for this school. You could study with a rabbi your whole life, but to be ordained was a step that not everyone took.
Right.
You'll find even rabbis in the Talmud that never received ordination because their rabbis didn't see that they fit the description, but they knew a lot, enough to be quoted in the Talmud or the Mishnah. You find that Rabbi Akiva was the first one who broke the rule. Rabbi Akiva ordained how many students? 24,000 students. He had the largest rabbinic academy that we're ever familiar with. The biggest yeshiva in the world has like 5,000 people in it, and not all of them are in. This was Rabbi Akiva was in Israel.
Yeah.
Rabbi Akiva was right during the destruction of the temple, so Roman occupation. After the Romans end up killing 24,000 of his students, according to the Geonim, or according to our Talmud, they died because of a plague, because they hated each other. Rabbi Akiva makes a certain rectification of his philosophy, and he ordains only 5 more rabbis. He felt that the mass, it didn't work. They all wanted to be his students. They were all smart, but they lacked the personality. We said they weren't able to respect each other. And that was a flaw that he had overlooked because he thought maybe it was about knowledge, maybe it was about leadership, but it wasn't about character. He tested them, he knew them, but they didn't pass the bar. And he only ordains 5 more students. And this goes on from generation to generation to generation to generation to generation to the Holocaust. I won't lie to you that before the Holocaust, in Europe, ordination was laughed upon. Remember I told you last week, only the losers go become rabbis. That was true. Still is true in certain communities. I'm not talking about them, I'm talking about the integrity, the rabbinic chain of integrity. After the war, there's a famous letter from the Chavetz Chaim. Another famous letter from the Lubavitch Rebbe. Both who said, well, the Chavetz Chaim didn't live after the war, he lived before the war, but his ruling was followed after the war. So when you go to war, you're planning strategies, battles, you only bring your best soldiers with you. But when you are attacked from all sides and the town is burning down, everyone becomes an officer. Everyone goes to war. Everyone takes it on their back to go do what they can do. The Lubavitch Rebbe pushed this envelope so far as to demand from his Hasidim that nobody gets married before they receive the title rabbi.
Before they receive
The title rabbi.
Before Second World War?
No, after the Second World War. This is now. The last Lubavitch Rebbe passed away in the 90s. And so in Chabad, you'll know that everybody who gets married is called rabbi. And therefore, their understanding of what is a rabbi is anybody who's going to put out the so-called fires of assimilation. There are too many Jews that don't know, too many Jews that are not being reached in the far-flung places in the world. We don't have the luxury to create more Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneersons. We have to just create small-time rabbis. Go here, go there, go. 10 months, training program. 1 year, training program. Get out. Eish Torah does the same thing. 1 year training program. Get out. We need to put rabbis everywhere in the world. And it did serve a very big need. They found people on the streets, and they found people where nobody else was going to look for them. And they turned over rocks, and they found Jews, and all kinds of things that they did. But this mentality, what it created was a rabbinate that was void of scholarship. And not just void of scholarship, because in Israel, they decided we're going to up the standard. We're going to create rabbis. It takes 5, 7, 10 years to be a rabbi in the Israeli chief rabbinate. But you have to become ordained by the chief rabbis of Israel. So if a few thousand students get ordained every year in Israel, how many of them do you think actually know the chief rabbis of Israel?
Oh, maybe 10.
Do you know that the chief rabbis of Israel, to the best of my knowledge, don't teach one rabbinic training class?
I believe so.
Rather, they have many other rabbis that teach in their name. And then what happens once a year, once every 6 months, they have a test in the central building in Jerusalem. You come to the test, you fill out your 100 question answers, and you get an ordination from the chief rabbinate of Israel. Today, this is considered the most prestigious rabbinic ordination in the world. Something which I don't have, by the way. Which when I go to Israel, I have to prove again, every time I want to do a wedding, I have to send in my certificates to prove that I'm a rabbi. I'm not ordained. I did, but it was like a ghetto hasmach. I was like, under the table. Why? Because I wasn't ordained by the chief rabbis. And I'll tell you why. I had the option. I studied in the same yeshiva. Half of us studied by Rav Peretz, half of us studied in the chief rabbinate program. I said, how am I going to study for a rabbi from 7 years? 7 years of my life. I'm going to spend 5 years of my 4 years, whatever it's going to be. And I won't even receive their certificate. Rather, I'm going to receive certificate from some rabbi I never met through the mail. The chief rabbi of Israel is going to say, I ordained him as a rabbi. You don't even know me. You never met me in your life. What are you ordaining me for a rabbi? They say that in that building in Jerusalem, in the bathrooms, people are using books, Jewish books, to cheat on the tests. Because they want to get the certificate. They're not there because they have this great... And here, I'm not going to brag. But in the wording of Rabbi Peretz's certificate is something very different. Halachot are not the main part of what we need to know. He does mention, I studied Talmud, I studied Mishnah, but there's one sentence which if you can't fit this description, he won't give you a certificate. And that's what happened to that student. And he'll tell you, I can't sign on your certificate unless I can add these words. He adds in a sentence that even though he studied these halachot and those laws, and the next laws, and the third laws, it says, Zirat cheto kodemet lechokmato. His fear of sin, his fear of mistake, is greater than his knowledge. The statement is used traditionally in Jewish literature to imply his character outweighs his knowledge. Which is, it doesn't make a difference what you know. You can know a lot, but you have horrendous character. I won't ordain you, Rabbi Peretz says. So when I was in Jerusalem, I said, I have a choice. I can run in the big leagues, the major leagues, with the big fish and the chief rabbis of Israel, or I could get some third-party smicha, which I'll tell you, I studied by Rabbi Peretz. I was at his feet for 4 years of my life. Every week of my life, I call Rabbi Peretz. Just the other day, I spoke to him. Last night, I spoke to his wife. This is my teacher. And ordination used to mean that this rabbi says, I trust you enough, not just what you know. I trust your character enough that I'm personally passing on the baton to you. Today, rabbi doesn't mean that anymore. Today, rabbi means you passed the test. Good for you. You got a driver's license. And yeah, that did help. It helped put rabbis in all the corners of the globe. But I beg the question, what about the moral integrity of these rabbis? Rabbi Peretz's system isn't flawless. I'm sure I'll find out one day that one of my colleagues did something or another that he shouldn't have done. But it's as close to flawless as you can get. But when there's no personal responsibility, when the relationship of rabbi to student is not personal, it's in a mail order certificate, it's almost a comedy. It's almost a joke. I'm sorry, it's almost a joke. And then I beg the question, so how do you expect rabbis to fit all the things you just mentioned when it's not even part of the test? Your rabbis are experts, not yours. The rabbis you go to are good. I'm not putting... The rabbis that I'm talking about, they're experts maybe in the whole tractates of Jewish law. But nobody ever asked them, hey, are you going to smack somebody in the face when they drive to Shul on Shabbat? Are you going to throw rocks to the next door neighbor because he put his speaker? I don't know what. They didn't ask him anything. They don't know him. And so when we're dealing with the question, so who can be a rabbi? At the end of today's class, I'm going to tell you the answer. Anybody with an email address. Anybody with a driver's license can be a rabbi. You can get smicha today online.
What?
No, you do have to take a written test. That's what
Oh,
it
okay,
said in
good,
the
good.
article.
Right,
You
you
do
do-
everything online,
And then you take
just
the written
show
test
up
at the
for
end.
the written test.
And
And is that done separately, or is it everybody goes into one room and they all sit down and do it, or is it
Probably
done
one room.
I know three rabbis. I know them, cute little kids. They got their smicha on Skype, sitting in Starbucks.
Do they have kahal? Do they have followers?
Sure, all the people in Starbucks.
What I mean, you can be a rabbi.
Yeah, sure, you
on your own
can
and
get
you
hired
be a
with such a
rabbi.
certificate. Of course, you can get a job with such a certificate.
Okay.
And so maybe I'm making the situation even worse. Not only do all of these qualities that you mentioned not only apply to men, but if today ordination is as cheap as doing it online, why can't a lady be a rabbi?
Why indeed?
If you told me it was only scholars who spent 100 years sitting in yeshiva with rabbis and they had to lead services and there are all kinds of things that only a man could do, and even many men in the world wouldn't qualify to be a rabbi, fine, I would maybe I'd struggle, but I would hear you, I'd understand where you're coming from. But if you're telling me that every 18-year-old guy with internet access can become a rabbi, and that somebody will hire them for the rabbi of their synagogue, then why not somebody who actually sat and studied and knows and is wise and is compassionate, is understanding? Why can't they serve in the similar position? Call it what you want. That's my question for you. I'm not giving you my personal conclusion. I'm just trying to pick your brains so we think a little bit outside of our own comfort zones. B'ezrat Hashem, next week on Monday. Yirat cheto kodemet lechochmato.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.